DJ Scream, heavy in the streets.
We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood. We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood.
Hood rich.
Get it out the mud.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And we are back with some more appetizers for you. And if we do too many more, this may just be the header of the podcast. This may just be the main course for the podcast. But we have some at the moment just some appetizers for you, and we're back with it this evening with UFC 312. Plessis versus Strickland 2. So this is the rematch of between them of when Plessis snuck out a split decision victory in their first matchup back months ago in Canada. And ever since then, there's been conversations of if it was a bad judging call or if it should have been split decision the other way or not. But definitely a lot of talk and build up through the media, if nothing else, with this fight. But yeah, that's exciting. So this is so we're talking about UFC 312 Plessis versus Strickland 2, and their first matchup was in Canada, but this is in the Kudos Bank Arena in Sydney, Australia, and this is February 9th, 2025, and this is at the standard UFC pay-per-view event time. Not starting at not the preliminary starting at 8 in the morning, but just for the regular pay-per-view event, it's starting 9 Central, 10 Eastern, like your standard, your average pay-per-view event. Which that I actually thought that was fun last week with the event being in Saudi Arabia, but this event is not in Saudi Arabia. And besides, we talked a little bit about the main event. That was something that was kind of nice about the previous two events, at least the ones that I've done podcasts, I guess UFC 311 and then Fight Night Adesanya versus Imov. What was that the prelims had like good fights and some notable names to speak of, but not this card. This card really doesn't. It's mostly the main card, and that's about it. And even with the main card, like the first three fights are notable fighters, popular fighters, notable names, and against fighters that you maybe never really heard of, but they have some connection to Australia, so that's kind of why they got on the main card. So besides really the co-main event and the main event, this card isn't overly exciting. And there's, like I said, there's nothing really on the prelims, but at least there is a heavyweight bout on the main card and a light heavyweight bout. So you're getting some beef. You're getting a little bit of beef on the main card, if nothing else. So that's the card. Let's get into the main card here. I don't have much to say about the early prelims or the prelims. Nothing with their co-main events or main events either. But let's go ahead and just get into the main card of UFC 312. Dricus Plessis versus Strickland 2. So can I get a menu? And so the first fight on the main card is a welterweight bout between Jake Matthews, who's a pretty well-known MMA fighter, UFC fighter. So that name is familiar, is notable. But then he's fighting Francisco Prado. And Francisco Prado has only had a couple fights in the UFC. He's had 3 fights in the UFC. Francisco Prado. Sorry, that's a weird graphic on my screen, confusing me for a second. But he's had 3 fights in the UFC, and he is 1-2 in those 2 fights. He's won one of those fights One of those fights by TKO punches, and then lost the other two by unanimous decision. And uh, he's on a one fight losing streak to Daniel Zellhuber. So, and then overall, in some fights, two fights that he won by TKO that were not in the UFC. So before he started his 1-3 run in the UFC, he did have two wins. So he's 3-1 in his last five fights, with the three wins being by TKO, and then the two losses being by decision. And I would say that he's kind of more of your like kind of like true mixed martial artist, but coming from American top team, I imagine he's a good wrestler, has good Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and then has just enough striking, probably boxing, kickboxing to add to his strikes. But he's a young fighter. If nothing else, that's really the main thing to highlight about him. He was born June 16th, 2002, if that make you feel old, but he's only 22 years old, so that's extremely young for this fighter, this weight class, this sport in general. With a fighter that's this age, I mean, they could be a different fighter every fight to fight. They could be a completely different like athlete, because they're so young and there's so much growth and so much clay to mold with him. But he's had let's see, he's had 14 fights, and he is 12-2 in those 14 fights. In the 12 wins, he has 6 wins by KO or knockout, and then 6 wins by submission. So he has a 100% finish rate in all of his wins. So that's an impressive statistic there. And then in his two losses, he has two losses, just the two losses by decision. So he's only never been stopped. If he wins, he's going to get a submission or a knockout. If he loses, it's probably going to go the distance. All right, and he's fighting Jake Matthews here. It's his opponent, definitely a more veteran fighter in the UFC, been fighting, and still only 30 years old. We're talking about a veteran in the UFC, but he's been fighting in the UFC since back in 20, June 28th, 2014. So pushing up, pushing up on what, 11 years? That's nuts. He's been fighting in the UFC, and Cruz or Jake Matthews, sorry, Jake Matthews was more of a mix. He's more of a true mixed martial artist and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, because I guess when he was growing up, playing like rugby and soccer and stuff like that was a sport that they took a training method for that helped their bodies was being uh, doing MMA and rolling and BJJ. So I'd say Jake Matthews is a true mixed martial arts and mixed martial artist, and just the fact that he's such a veteran in the game. He's fought just about every type of fighter. He's seen pretty much everything. And he has a similar record in his last five fights. He's 3-2 in his last five fights, and he's just on a one fight winning streak. Philip Rowe, he beat by unanimous decision. And two of those fights, Andre Falaho and Darius Flowers, in that five fight last five fights, he had a KO punch and did have a submission rear naked choke over some guys. But just in his most recent fight, it's just a decision win. And he's had 27 fights with 20 wins and 7 losses. In the 20 wins, he has 5 wins by knockout, 8 wins by submission and 7 wins by decision. So he shows that he can beat you in any way. He can knock you out, submit you, or go the distance. And then in his 7 losses, he's only been knocked out once, so he shows that he's got a good chin. But he has been submitted 3 times, and he has gone the distance, lost going the distance 3 times as well. This is kind of a tough fight to pick to pick. Honestly, is it a fight that picked to build up Francisco Prado, or is it something to help Jake Matthews kind of build up? I kind of feel like another loss for Francisco Prado, even though he's only 22 years old, would be a big hit to his confidence and a big hit to his resume, you know. But that's honestly what I see it's going to happen here. I'm thinking Jake Matthews is probably going to win this just with the fact that his ground game is just going to be just a little bit better, and even his striking is just going to be a little bit better. And that's just they just playing that into the fact that he's just a more veteran fighter and been around longer and older. I know it seems kind of like a weird kind of cop out for a pick, but that's kind of how I see it. I just feel he's going to be better pretty much everywhere that Francisco Prado wants to take this fight. But I don't see a finish from either one of these fighters. So in the welterweight first bout on the card, a welterweight bout between Jake Matthews versus Francisco Prado. I got Jake Matthews. I think he's going to win this by decision, unanimous decision. I think he's going to win it just from basically just controlling the fight anywhere it goes, whether it's stand up, striking, or if it goes to the ground. But I don't see the aggressiveness or that Jake Matthews is some like great finisher or anything. I mean, if he gets the finish, I guess it would probably be a submission. But Francisco Prado has good wrestling and Brazilian jiu-jitsu himself. All right. Now then, on to the second fight on the card. We have a light heavyweight bout between Jimmy Crute versus Rodolfo Bellato, Rodolfo Bellato. And this is a fight where it's kind of the opposite almost of the previous fight because Jake Matthews in his most recent fights and things like that he's been kind of up and down, but for the most part positive and successful. And then he's fighting a young up and coming fighter that's kind of had a little bit of his ups and downs a little bit. Well, this is kind of a little different because Jimmy Crute is veteran in this matchup between Rodolfo Bellato. He's the veteran in this matchup because he's younger, but he's the UFC veteran, I guess, because he's fought in the UFC longer. Uh, Bellato is only 29, but Jimmy Creets is only 28. So I guess there's not that big of a age difference between them. But Jimmy Crute's been fighting in the UFC since July 24th, 2018. So he's definitely more seasoned in the UFC than Bellato, who's only started fighting in the UFC on October 3rd, 2023. But what I'm trying to get at before I got mixed up in the ages and the UFC veteranism was that unlike Jake Matthews, Jimmy Crute is on a little bit of a tougher run. His last 5 fights have been kind of rough. So this is definitely one where you could argue that Bellato, the trader Bellato, the trader Bellato could be favored in this matchup because Jimmy Crute in his last 5 fights is he's 1-3-1 with the no contest, and in his last 4 fights he's just on the four fight run here he's 0-3-1 with a no contest, and last fight was guillotine choke loss to Alonzo Minifield, who was the fighter that the fight went to not no contest, but a draw to Alonzo Minifield. So he went to a draw with him and then rematched him and got choked out and then was knocked out by Jamal Hill and TKO doctor stoppage Anthony Smith. So he's on a bit of a tough run, as you can see, but it's shown that he has talent in the UFC. But he's kind of known for like his karate and his judo and his mixed martial arts. Another fighter that you could say is like a true mixed martial artist. He has success everywhere, you know. But he has 17 fights with 12 wins and 4 losses. In the 12 wins, he has 5 wins by knockout, 4 wins by submission, and three, and then 3 wins by decision. And then in the 4 losses, he's been knocked out twice and been submitted twice, and then no losses by decision, and then the one draw that we were speaking of. So we're talking about Jimmy Crutes as kind of being a UFC veteran, kind of on a bumpy road. Well, and he's running into a fighter that's kind of like the complete opposite. So is Jimmy Crutes, is he a can or a stepping stone for the trader Bellato? It kind of feels like it to an extent. And he's a fighter that's got great kickboxing, but also has great Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but has that knockout, one shot knockout power that you're wanting to see from heavyweights, 205ers. And we mentioned that he's 2-0 in the UFC with 2 wins in the second round by TKO punches. But in his last 5 fights, he's 4-1, and he's on a 4-fight winning streak with 3 of those 4 fights ending with TKO knockouts. And he has 14 total fights with in the 12 wins, has 7 of them by knockout, 4 by decision, and 1 by decision. So it shows you, like, if he can't get the knockout, if it goes to the ground or it gets kind of a crazy scramble, he can get a hold of your neck, or he can get a hold of your arm and submit you as well. And then in the 2 losses, he's shown a little bit of a tendency to leave his chin out there and get knocked out, especially to Victor Petrino, who's the fighter that KO'd him, not TKO'd him, but KO'd him in his only 2 losses. So that seems about the only way. That seems about the only way you can beat him is if you get Victor Petrino to knock him out for you. But in this bout between Jimmy Crute versus the trader Bellato, I'm going with the trader Rodolfo Bellato, the trader, to win this fight over Jimmy Crutes and maybe send Jimmy Crutes up out of the UFC, kind of like we saw last week with Pogues and Jairzinho Rogenstrike. The Monday after the event, they're getting fired or getting cut from the card, the roster. So that's kind of what I see. I see for the few times that you see like the UFC veteran being the guy that's the can or the jag or the stepping stone. That's definitely what I see here for Bellato, the trader Bellato, over Jimmy Crute. So in this light heavyweight bout between Jimmy Crute versus Rodolfo Bellato, the trader, I'm going with Bellato to win this. And I think he's going to get a knockout TKO. And I think it'd probably be, I think Jimmy Crute has good enough judo and karate striking to hold him off for at least the first round. But I think just the knockout power and the and explosiveness that you get from the trader Bellato is going to be too much for Jimmy Crute, who's already kind of on a rough stretch here in his last 5 fights. All right, now then on to a heavyweight bout between Justin Tafa versus Taliesin Teixeira. So just like three fights in a row on the main card where it's like a UFC veteran versus a guy that's maybe only fought like 2 or 3 times in the UFC. So it's like, is this guy an up and comer fighting a veteran, or is it a veteran trying to pad their stats, pad their resume? That's kind of what it feels like a little bit. Feels like two of the 3 fights seem like it's a UFC veteran trying to get a young fighter and not trying to pad their stats and their roster and their resume a little bit, not their roster, but their record a little bit. Two out of 3. That's the Jake Matthews versus Francisco Prado and Justin Tafa versus Taliesin Teixeira seem like veteran fighters trying to get back on that winning streak, so to speak. But in this heavyweight bout, we have Justin Tafa, who's known for just that one punch, devastating knockout power. Like either he's going to get the knockout in the first round, or he's not going to win. Probably going to lose going to decision, most likely. But he's an Australian, so he's a favorite here over in Sydney, Australia, the King's Island, in Australia, and he is 3-1-1 in his last 5 fights, with one loss, and his last fight was a unanimous decision, lost to Carl Williams, and then he had a no contest after an eye poke rendered Tafa unable to continue the fight against Austin Lane. So that was 3 fights back. But then in his second fight back, in his most recent win, he fought Austin Lane again and KO punched him. And that was at the 122 mark of the first round at UFC 293, September 10th, 2023. So he pretty much shows you with him, he's looking for that one punch knockout, devastating knockout. If he can get you in a bad enough situation to where he can rain down some devastating ground and pound, he'll do that as well. But I imagine he's just looking to stuff the takedown and land some dynamite with those hands on somebody's chin. And he's fighting Taliesin Teixeira, that we were mentioning. What were we mentioning? Age and stuff earlier on that last fight. Got a little confused with the first 2. So Justin Tafa is not old at 31 years old, but Taliesin, we got another youngster coming in here. These kind of fights and fighters make you feel old. Born in December 7th, 1999. So he was born a day after of the same day as me, but not the same year. But he's only 25 years old. So that's wild. He's 6'8" and 6'8", 262. And he is probably a striker as well. I think that's pretty much shown that that's all he does for the most part in regards to his 7 only wins. So he's on a 7-fight winning streak, 5-0 in his last 5, and just 1 fight in the UFC, which was a Dana White Contender Series where he KO punches Arthur Lopez. So this will be a big step up in competition for him, just from going from these smaller organizations than UFC and then fighting in the Contender Series to, hell, you're on the main card UFC 12 as probably a kickboxer, looking for that knockout at the heavyweight position. But he has 7 total fights, and with 7 wins, 0 losses. In the 7 wins, 6 of them have come by knockout and 1 by submission. So that pretty much explains to you what he's trying to do. But man, I feel like this is a huge step in competition, even though Justin Tafa is not that much older and really hasn't had that many more fights than him as well. But I just feel like this is a huge step up in competition for a young fighter like Taliesin Teixeira. So in this heavyweight bout between Justin Tafa versus Taliesin Teixeira, I got Justin Tafa winning this. I think he's going to win this in the first round, like by knockout. Honestly, he's gonna KO Talison Teixeira. All right. Now then, on to the co-main event. We have a women's strawweight bout between Zhang Weili, the champion, versus Tatiana Sar Sar Sar. What is it? Tatiana Suarez. Sorry about that. So Zhang Weili versus Tatiana Suarez. And so this is Zhang Weili, she's considered right up there as like Zhang Weili, Magnum, one of the best strawweight women's champions of all time, the 115-pound position division, which is so impressive with the kind of stuff that she's done in this division with the knockouts and the submissions, the finishes. Just being only 115 pounds is what's been so impressive with her, and she just has such great striking with such power for 115 pounds, but she also has great wrestling to where if that suits her, she can beat you with wrestling or Brazilian jiu-jitsu, or she just needs to use it to avoid being taken down and being able to stuff and stop takedowns or be able to get back up is very impressive with what she does. And she's 4-1 in her last 5 fights, and she's on a 4-fight winning streak with that loss being to Rose Namajunas, a split decision back November 6, 2021. But since then, she's been on a pretty good run, a fight 4-fight winning streak where she finally won the belt back over Carla Esparza with submission rear naked choke. Got the chance to fight her after KO spinning back fist over Jairzinho Rosenstrike. She retired Jairzinho Rosenstrike, and then since then she's gone some 5-minute going the distance wars with Amanda Lemos and Yan Zanon, which was a crazy fight back April 2024. The one where that girl literally got like submitted, like choked out, rear naked choke in the first round, and then came back to life, and then got saved by the bell again in that fight somewhere where it looked like she'd gotten knocked out at the end of the round and literally got like saved and like resuscitated with smelling salts or something over in the corner between rounds. But that was a crazy, memorable fight. Two fighters from China going at it for the first time for a belt. But Zhang Weili, she has 28 matches in her career with 25 wins and just 3 losses. In the 25 wins, she has 11 wins by knockout. So that shows you, even being only 115 pounds, she has some dynamite explosiveness in those hands and devastating ground and pound to go along with 8 submissions and 6 wins by decision. So she can beat you anywhere and win and dominate no matter where the fight goes. And then in her 3 losses, she's only been knocked out once, which was a crazy head kick by Rose Namajunas, like in 2021, and then never submitted. So I think that's a lot of what you're hearing wrestling about is the ground game, because I guess Tatiana Suarez has a great ground. As you see, she's never been submitted, but she's also submitted, shown that she can get the submission with 8 submissions, but never been submitted, and then has lost 2 by decision. So Tatiana Suarez, I think, is actually considered like the favorite coming into this fight, even though I guess she's had a lot of issues over her career with, I guess, she was kind of like Perk Angle. She's trying to win some gold medals with a broken freaking neck, but I guess that didn't really work out for her too much in wrestling, so she had to quit wrestling, and then I guess she blew her knee out once she kind of started getting hot in mixed martial arts. But she's an Olympic gold style type of wrestling, Division One wrestler. So most people, even because just talking about Zhang Wei Li being small but having knockout power. Well, kind of same with Tatiana Suarez. She's only 115 pounds small, but she ragdolls these other women that she's been facing. So she is 10-0 in her career, has no losses. She is, let's see here, she is 7-0 in the UFC. Has won 7 straight fights, and then obviously she's 5-0 in her last 5 fights, with wins over like what a, just a killing a list of killers from her last five. Submission, rear naked choke over Alexa Grasso, TKO punches, Carla Sparza, Nina Astroff, decision, Montana Della Rosa, submission, guillotine choke, and Jessica Andrade, guillotine choke. So pretty impressive. I guess I can kind of see why she's the favorite. But man, maybe I'm being too big of a fan of Zhang Wei Li, and just the fact, like kind of like some of the previous fighters on the card, they're more UFC veterans. Even though I guess she's I guess Tatiana Suarez has been fighting in the UFC since July 8th, 2016. So she's a veteran too, just due to health issues. I don't think she's been able to uh, obtain the belt, hadn't been able to go on long enough runs or stay healthy long enough to finally get her title shot like she is now. But in her 10 wins, she has 2 wins by knockout, 5 wins by submission, and 3 by decision. But she shows that she can wrestle. She can get the submission, get a hold of your neck, and submit you. And is like they were trying to say, the best wrestler in the in the women's straw weight division, the 115-pound weight division. But in this bout, let's see. So Zhang Wei Li, kind of see what she's done. Just went over it. Decisions. She's kind of had to grind out these decisions in her last couple wins. So in this women's strawweight championship bout between Zhang Wei Li, the champion, versus Tatiana Suarez, the challenger, I'm going with Zhang Wei Li to win this, and I think she's going to be able to do just enough by avoiding takedowns, stuffing takedowns, being able to get back up if she is taken down, and avoiding getting put in a rear naked choke if Tatiana Suarez gets her back, and then with stuffing those takedowns and trying to keep it standing as much. I think it's just clear, already kind of clear that Zhang Wei Li is the better striker and has more powerful strikes, and I think she'll be able to keep the distance, and she can keep Tatiana Suarez off of her. I see she can win this. And I was originally, until I really looked at Tatiana Suarez's record and resume, I was going to say like Zhang Wei Li is going to be able to stuff her takedowns and avoid getting taken down, and that's going to lead to her well, immensely better or greater, better striking to maybe knocking Tatiana Suarez out, maybe with a knee kind of Jorge Masvidal style, as she's trying to come in for a reckless takedown, catches her with a jumping knee or something like that. But looking at how tough Tatiana Suarez is, the only way I see her losing, because it hasn't shown that she can be knocked out or submitted, is just Zhang Wei Li showing her what it's like to grind out and have to go 25 minutes to win a decision. So in this championship strawweight bout between Zhang Wei Li, the champion, versus Tatiana Suarez, the challenger, I got Zhang Wei Li winning this, and I think it's gonna be a tough one. It could easily see it being a split decision, or one fighter winning 3 of the rounds and one just winning 2. It going being close like that. But I think Zhang Wei Li is going to be able to show her savviness and her champion vigor to be able to keep Tatiana Suarez off of her and show that she has the better striking. All right. So now then, on to the middleweight, the championship, the co-main event championship bout, middleweight bout between Dricus du Plessis, the champion, versus Sean Strickland, the challenger. And this fight, there's been a lot of build up. You know, very comical. The stuff that these guys have said back and forth to each other, and even some of the stuff comments that Sean Strickland has said about Australia. I mean, I probably can't say even half of the stuff that he said in some of the press conferences they have, but if you want a good laugh, I suggest you go look some of that stuff up because some of the stuff that he says to either Dricus du Plessis or saying to those Australian fans was so comical, was hilarious. But these two have already fought, so there's some bad blood between them because of that. Some people think that Sean Strickland won the first fight because went to split decision, and just after the fight, like post fight interviews and just and conversations and photos and pictures definitely showed that looked like Dracus du Plessis took the more damage in that fight. He was eating a Sean Strickland jab like the entire fight, but I guess he went for more of the takedowns and had some scenarios where it looked like he was trying to be more explosive enough during those moments to trying to get the takedown. So I guess it wasn't just the damage that could have won Sean Strickland the fight, but this is a fight that's being anticipated and definitely built up, definitely due to the bad blood. But I think we're going to get another barn burner from these two. Uh, and Dracus du Plessis has been impressive, has been an impressive contender and an impressive champion. He is on a bit of a winning streak as well. Let's see. He's on a 10 fight winning streak, and he is 8-0 in the UFC. And in his last five fights, he's 5-0 in his last five fights, with four of those five being by stoppage. So the fifth fight back, UFC 282, December 10th, 2022, he submission face crank over Darren Till, TKO corner stoppage Derek Brunson, TKO punches Robert Whitaker, and then Sean Strickland, who was able to drag him the distance, and some arguably thought he won that split decision, thought it was 2-2 going into the fifth round, and thought that Sean Strickland maybe did enough to win the fifth round, but I mean, the current belt holder, it's still Dracus du Plessis. And then, really, the most impressive performance of Dracus du Plessis' career was definitely the submission face crank at the 338 mark in the fourth round over Israel Asanya that really laminate himself and supplant himself as the current and best middleweight champion in the UFC at the moment. And then just total 24 total fights in his career with 22 wins and 2 losses. In the 22 wins, he has 9 wins by knockout, 11 wins by submission, and 2 by decision. And then in the 2 losses, he has 1 loss by knockout and 1 by submission. But he's an all-around fighter, but he has great uh, Brazilian jiu-jitsu and wrestling and just a great submission game. But he's also has explosive one punch knockout, and is a great kickboxer as well. Has great kickboxing, but it's probably not quite as crisp and as clean and as timed and calculated as Sean Strickland is, which leads into this maybe being a crazy sequel to the original fight that felt like, to me, from what I can remember from that fight, it kind of felt like Sean Strickland was just kind of pitter patting and kind of just chewing him up, and definitely chewing up one of those eyes like the entire fight, and just going off of damage after the fight. It felt pick that hard to pick or hard to say that Dracus du Plessis won that fight. Like with how bad he looks like. He looks like Texas Chainsaw Massacre wearing mask. Looks like he's wearing a mask or something, a skin mask. His face looks like it's flapping. But that's not how it went. Uh, so they lost. He lost the split decision to Dricus du Plessis. But before that, Sean Strickland, he was like running through everybody. He was he's four he's 4-1 in his last five, with the one being the loss to Dricus du Plessis. But he was uh, just going some 5-minute wars and some 5-minute bouts. Uh, he fought Nazaruddin Imov, but that was a 5 rounder that was that light heavyweight though. And then Spion Magmadov, he went TKO punches on him. And then we have this is kind of his run as a middleweight champion and challenger. He fought Israel Adesanya September 10th, 2023, went all 5 rounds with him and did kind of what it felt like he did to Dricus du Plessis, where he just kind of avoided damage and tried to avoid any kind of takedown or submission attempts from Sean Strickland, which didn't have to, or not Sean Strickland, but Dricus du Plessis, but didn't really have to worry about that too much from Israel Adesanya. I remember with the fight against Israel Adesanya, he just kept coming forward, and that just kind of broke Israel Adesanya in that fight. And that seemed kind of similar to what Dricus du Plessis did in their fight, but I think he just did a little bit more in moments where it looked like he possibly had a chance to try to finish the fight, or he got takedowns when John Strickland really didn't get any. So that's the one loss back, two fights back, and then he's on a 1 fight winning streak over Paulo Costa, where even though it was split decision, felt like he kind of just he stamina junkies people. He tries to tries to test everyone's gas tank. But in 35 fights, he's had 29 wins with 6 losses. In the 29 wins, he's had 11 wins by knockout, only 4 wins by submission. So he doesn't have a great submission game, but he does have a good uh, ability to stuff takedowns and be able to get back up if he gets taken down. So only 4 wins by submission, and then the 14 wins by decision shows how he can go the distance with people and try people's stamina, see what people's gas tanks are at. And then in the 6 losses, he's been knocked out twice, never been submitted. So even though he hasn't got a bunch of submissions, he doesn't get stopped, submitted on the ground, or has a good submission defense. And then four losses by decision. All right. So the middleweight bout between Dracus, the middleweight championship bout, the main event between Dricus du Plessis, the champion, versus Sean Strickland, the challenger. I think this fight is going to be a whole lot of the first fight. Basically, it's just a crazy barn burning war, and Sean Strickland constantly coming forward, and Dricus du Plessis eating those jabs, but still Dricus du Plessis is able to mix in a little bit more ground game. If nothing else, it's just something for the judges to look at and have to think about scoring, whether he gets the takedown or not. But just the thought of them could play into this matchup. But I think this fight's going to be similar to the first one. But they talk about how you gotta beat the champ to be the champ. That doesn't seem to hold true really all that much anymore, because we're seeing fighters win the belt from the champion off of like split decisions and stuff here lately. So I think it's going to basically be a flip of what we thought before, but this time it's going to be maybe a split decision, but Sean Strickland is going to win this, and he's going to beat up and try to turn Dracus du Plessis' face in the ground beef again. I don't think either one's going to come close to getting a knockout or a submission or anything, but I think it's going to be basically it's going to, when the horn sounds for the first round, that's basically going to be round 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 basically. So we're going to get a whole lot of the same, but this time I think they're going to get get the prediction for the fight a little more closely to what it was last time when it was, should have been Sean Strickland just retaining the belt. So it'll be a little more close to the right prediction from what it should have been last time. So in this middleweight bout between Dricus du Plessis, the champion, versus Sean Strickland, the challenger, I got Sean Strickland winning this bout and winning his middleweight championship belt back. And I have him doing this in a decision by decision, all going all 5 rounds, 25 minutes. And I think it's going to be a whole lot more of the same from the first fight, where it's just basically them just beating each other up the entire fight. But it's going to look like the damage that you're going to see is going to be more from Sean Strickland, what he does to Dricus du Plessis, and whether he gets another cut or not, whether we know whether it was from an elbow or a punch or if it was a headbutt. Maybe Sean Strickland, if he comes out away from this with like no real visible damage at all, and Sean Strickland is left looking like what he was in the first fight, I think there'd be no way you could not give this and give the middleweight championship belt back to Sean Strickland. But anyways, that's my card. Let's just run through these picks again so we kind of know what our picks are going to be. So let's see. So and yeah, so the first fight on the main card, we have a welterweight bout between Jake Matthews versus Francisco Prado. And in this bout, I got Jake Matthews just kind of edging this fight out against Francisco Prado, just because it's a big step up in competition for Francisco Prado. I think they both have good striking games, but I'd say they're both probably a little bit better like on the ground. But I think Jake Matthews is going to just end up controlling this fight wherever it goes. But I don't see him being overly dangerous for Francisco Prado in regards to getting finished. So I think Jake Matthews is just going to grind out a decision victory over him. So in the welterweight bout between Jake Matthews versus Francisco Prado, I got Jake Matthews winning by decision. And then the second fight on the bout, we have a light heavyweight bout between Jimmy Crute versus Rodolfo Bellato, the Traitor. And this is kind of similar. You know, you got more of a veteran versus more of a amateur kind of coming into the UFC. You know, only had maybe 1 or 2 fights in the UFC. But I think this fight is being made out for Jimmy Crute to kind of be a jag or a stepping stone for Rodolfo Bellato. And so I have him knocking Jimmy Crute out. So in this lightweight bout between Jimmy Crute versus Rodolfo Bellato, I got Bellato, the Traitor, knocking Jimmy Crute's out. And I think he'll be able to do that like in the second round, to speak of. And now then on to so we got some beef on this card. We're talking about got done talking about this light heavyweight bout, but then we have also a heavyweight bout on here of Justin Tafa versus Talison Teixeira. Some young guys on here. We had some young guys with Francisco Prado only being 22, and then Talison Teixeira only being 25 years old. And just kind of some of these fights, it just feels like it's a bit of a step up in competition, you know, and almost kind of like you're facing yourself, you know, you're fighting a guy that has 6, 7 wins and they're all by knockout or finish. And then you have 7 wins yourself and they're all knockout by finish. But I just feel Justin Tafa is a little bit more seasoned. So in this heavyweight bout between Justin Tafa versus Talison Teixeira, both of these guys are strikers and they're looking for the knockout, but I'm going to go with the veteran, Justin Tafa, to get the knockout over Talison Teixeira. I think that'll maybe happen in the first round. If Justin Tafa is going to get a stoppage or a knockout, it's usually going to happen in the first round. All right, now then, onto the co-main event, the women's strawweight championship bout between Zhang Wei Li, the champion, versus the challenger, Tatiana Suarez, who I guess buys a lot, you know, off of an impressive resume and in record, and people saying that she's the best, maybe the best women's wrestler, just hands down Olympic style Division I wrestler, but definitely the best and the strongest in the strawweight division. I think thinking that she's like should be like the favorite in this fight. But man, that's kind of a hard thing to say when you've seen what Zhang Wei Li has done in this division and the fighters and the women that she's beaten and the ways that she's done it. She's done it by knockout or submission or can go 25 minutes. Tatiana, she's got a bit of an injury history with what neck problems and what some kind of what thyroid cancer and what tore like every ligament in one of her knees. So she's kind of injury prone. So it'll be interesting if this fight goes 25 minutes, how her body holds up. And after hearing all those stories and the injury history of her, I really wouldn't want her to win and become champion, because then you have to deal with a champion pulling out of fights due to injuries and maybe pulling out a fight just because they're trying to save their title reign to go just a little bit longer because they don't want to fight a certain fighter, or they can just do easy pullouts. Oh, my neck hurts. Oh, my knee hurts. So in this women's strawweight championship bout between Zhang Wei Li, the champion, versus Tatiana Suarez, the challenger, I'm going with Zhang Wei Li, the champion, to retain her belt, and I think she's going to do a good enough job defending the takedowns and stuffing the takedowns, and even when Tatiana Suarez does get her down, she's going to be able to get back up and due to stuffing those takedowns and being to get back up after a takedown, she's going to be able to display that her much better striking game that she has over Tatiana Suarez. So in the women's strawweight championship bout between the champion Zhang Wei Li versus Tatiana Suarez, I got Zhang Wei Li winning this, and I think she's going to win this just by decision. Tatiana Suarez, she's 10-0, so she really just hasn't shown what method or what path to her losing would look like. But I could see going into that fourth round after going the original first 15, where maybe a wrestler like her could maybe start slowing down, and Zhang Wei Li maybe overwhelm her and maybe is able to get the knockout. But I'm just going with decision for now. And finally, the main event, the middleweight championship bout between Dricus du Plessis, the champion, versus Sean Strickland, the challenger. And this is a sequel to their original fight, which was a very, very close fight. There's some arguments and back and forth of whether Dricus du Plessis actually won that fight, and kind of the whole to beat the champ, to be the champ, you got to beat the champ, which you just didn't really see that, having Dricus du Plessis winning the fight off of a split decision. And a lot of people out there saying they had it 2-2 going into the fifth round, and a lot of people kind of said it was kind of hands down. Sean Strickland won the fifth round. So, we hear all these fighters always talking about I'm a completely different fighter when we first fought. I'm better than when we first fought. My ground game, my wrestling is better. My striking is better. I think we're going to get basically a similar bout that we got from the first fight. I think Dricus du Plessis, he has a better ground game and is really the only one that's probably looking to go for any type of takedowns or submissions really in this bout, unless Dricus du Plessis just literally leaves his arm or his neck hanging out there, because Sean Strickland can capitalize on it. But Sean Strickland, I think, is pretty much hands down the better striker, and just has a good boxing to just eat up his eye and try to turn his face into ground beef like last time. So I think we're gonna see that, but I think this time it's gonna go Sean Strickland's way, and he's gonna retain the belt. And I think just maybe doing just a little bit better job of stuffing the takedowns and keeping it kind of really like accurate, and not getting into any of those wild flurries that Dricus du Plessis seemed to have. He was able to rack up some points in your first bouts in some of those series and moments of fights. If he can stay out of that and keep the fight clean and calculated through the whole whole way and maybe defend a couple more of those takedowns, I don't see how they can't give it to Sean Strickland if Dricus du Plessis' face and eye is looking all chewed up like it was after their first fight, to where it was hard to believe that through split decision, where the phrase is always beat the champ. To be the champ, you got to beat the champ, you know. But I think it'll go the other way this time. So in this middleweight championship bout between Dricus du Plessis, the champion, versus Sean Strickland, the challenger, I got Sean Strickland winning this. I think it's going to be another 25-minute war, and he's going to win by decision. So that's the card. That's UFC 312, du Plessis versus Strickland 2, or Dricus du Plessis versus Strickland 2. And I'm excited for it. Honestly, I can't say that I'm as excited for it as I was the Asanye versus Imov fight night, or maybe even UFC 311. But there's definitely some potential. We have some heavyweight potential at the top, towards the top of the main card, and then you got some all-time greats for their weight classes for those title fights. But just seeing some crazy outcomes, and even some upsets could maybe add a little bit of flavor and a little bit of flair that it feels like these events have been missing a little bit since the start of 2025. But I'm here for it, and I'm ready, and I hope we get some more craziness. And like Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland have been saying leading up to this fight, is that they're going in there to kill each other. They're going in there to take years off of each other's life. And all the fans in Australia, all the fans over in the US, that's what we're here for. That's why we tune in. But anyways, I think that's about all I have for you. So can I get a check, please?